All right, so our first class here, we're going to look at the difference between verb to do and verb to be. So, what do you mean? Well, in any language in the world, we can express the human experience in two ways. Verb to be, which, I am happy, I am tired, I am a teacher, I am keen. So we can define it with adjectives or we can define it with nouns. Or verb to do. I teach, I write, I wake, I raise, I see, I drink, I train, these things. So what we want to look at is, well, what is the difference between the two? Which one is more practical when we're speaking? As a writer, which one is more practical than as a writer? So when we think about the difference between the two, one of these expresses a process and the other expresses the result. And that's it. So verb to do always expresses the process. It tells us and it shows us what's happening, whereas verb to be is the result. Verb to do, we could say, is like water, and verb to be is ice. It's the end result of that, it's something tangible that we can look at. So what do we mean by that? Well, we can say, for example, I teach English. So this is verb to do. This is me explaining a process. The result of that process, I am a teacher. Or if you want to be specific, I am an English teacher. And so as a result of that process, we can transform this verb into a noun. The same thing I can say, I write fiction. So that is the process. It's what I do. What is the result of that? I am a fiction writer. We can look at this in other ways. We can describe, for example, if we look at it in the back, and we start with verb to be, and someone might say, well, I am tired. This is the result. Well, what is the process of this? Well, we use some type of verb of action to explain why that person is tired. More than likely, we use present perfect. And present perfect works like a shadow. If the present is this state of, for example, I am tired, this person's got a little sad face, well, we want to know what is the shadow. And the shadow for that person represents what was happening recently. What is the reason for them being tired? And so they can say, well, I've been digging graves all morning. And so the verb to do, we can understand the action, we understand the process. We can see and feel and understand why that person is tired. In fact, if all we have is the verb to do, I've been digging graves all morning, we can assume the verb to be. You must be exhausted. So we can make that assumption from it. The same thing, let's say that I haven't seen a person in 10 years, 10 or 15 years. And this is the first time I'm going to see that person. So when I meet them, the first thing I say is, wow, you've changed. So once again, this change represents the process. It represents, the last 10 years since I saw that person. All of those changes. And I'm experiencing them in one moment. That's why we use the present perfect. We'll do a class, like a bunch of classes on present perfect in the future. This is one of the purposes of present perfect, is when we experience the past for the first time. And we're like, wow, you've changed. So how can we express that in verb to be? Same thing. Wow, you are different. So then we have to ask, well, which one's better? Verb to be or verb to do? Verb to be, we're stating what something is. You are different. Well, the person might say, how? More than likely, that will be their question. How? And then your answer will be, well, you've changed. So we're always going to learn more from the verb of action than we are from stating. The stating is just the result of things. It doesn't teach us anything. It doesn't explain anything. A good analogy, I think, maybe for the difference between verb to be and verb to do is when you were in science class in high school and your teacher told you to turn to page 152 and look at figure 15.2, which explained, like two chemicals being mixed into a beaker, and there would be some type of reaction that would cause, some type of explosion. And below it was a description of exactly what was occurring. This is verb to be. You're seeing something static, something still, but you're not learning as good as if your teacher says, okay, everyone come to the front of the class, let's blow up some shit. And so your teacher has a couple of beakers in his hand, a pair of plastic glasses, and some incredibly corrosive chemicals. And you're going to watch your teacher mix those chemicals together. You're going to see the explosion as it occurs, and you're going to understand more about that process. Verb to do is always better. We learn more from it. If I was to say, for example, I am a teacher, well, the first question is, well, what do you teach? You naturally want to know more. You want the process. The same thing, if I say I'm a writer, well, today everyone's a writer. So the next thing is, what do you write? You say, well, I write, weird books. I write weird fiction. If I say I am a father, I don't like this because anyone can just say I am a father. There are dudes at the moment sitting at a corner bar since 7 o'clock this morning, drinking cheap rum, cheap whiskey, and beer all day long. They're snorting lines of cocaine off the back of folded and beaten and dirty $2 notes. And they can go home drunk as a skunk, slap their wives, yell at their kids, fall over on the floor in a drunken, disgusting mess. And they can say they can. I'm the father. They can. It's easy to say what you are. This is one of the reasons I don't like the internet. Social network, it just wants you to tell the world what you are. It doesn't want them to show you what you do. Or it doesn't matter about processes. All you have to do is say, I am this, and that's good enough. Well, anyone can say I'm a father. I don't say I'm a father. I say I raise 2 monsters alone. I've been raising, so let's measure that. 2 monsters alone for 6 years. I hug my kids 50 times a day. I tell them I love them 50 different ways, 50 times a day. I hang out with my daughter. I watch fail videos with my daughter. I play Xbox with my son. I take them for walks. I teach them philosophy. I sit and listen to them to understand who they are as they're growing so I can change my language to suit the language that they understand in their subjective experience. I fold their clothes. I do the washing. I make their food. I clean up after them. I look after them in every way possible. Verbs of process and verb to do tells us so much more than verb to be. Anyone can say what they are. It comes down to experience when you tell people what you do, what you've done, or what you're doing. So let's look at this concept then. So we have a rule in writing, which is show, don't tell. What does this mean? Well, show, don't tell means, for example, the instinct when you're writing a book or you're writing a short story or anything is to explain the whole story to people as you know it in your own head. So to say that it was the year 2034 and everyone had 3 arms from a failed experiment 10 years earlier, blah, 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 blah. You want them all to know what you know right now. But the instinct of good writing is that every story should be a puzzle, like life is a puzzle, like you're a puzzle. Everything you do and everything new that you do that you discover yourself again. And throughout life, you're constantly discovering not the world, you're discovering you inside that world. Life is a big, giant fucking puzzle that by the end of it, you're dead. So whatever discovery you have becomes it becomes irrelevant. Beautiful, it's fantastic. So what do we mean by show, don't tell? Well, we mean show the process. Don't tell me what it is. So instead of saying, for example, she was tired, well, here there's no feeling. I want to discover that for myself. I want that judgment myself. So instead of she was tired, we can say she dragged her feet as she walked slowly across the room. Now, like the reader, we're able to kind of visualize her dragging her feet. And what do we know about this verb? Well, we know this verb already has an emotion. You're exhausted, or the weight of something is so beyond your potential. You can't lift, you have to pull it. And it's causing, you're losing more energy as you're trying to take every step. So here, The reader gets to say, wow, she was tired, or god damn, she was hungover, or whatever it might be. This also, in the case of writing, allows every reader to judge it in their way. They're allowed to have their own subjective experience. They're allowed to define how she feels. So this is one example. We could also say, for example, I could tell you, I am afraid of spiders. Okay, but that doesn't really transcend or make me feel that fear. So how would we do that with verb to do? Well, the problem here is just, I have this noun, and it doesn't really, in my head, if you tell me you're afraid of spiders, I can't see what those spiders are doing. So I don't feel your fear. And that's kind of the point of communication, is whatever I'm feeling inside, I have to code it in a way with the right words that you feel it too. So instead of I'm afraid of spiders, well, I'm afraid of pulling on my socks and feeling something small and tingly crawl over the arch of my foot and into the gaps between my toes. And then feeling it dig its sharp and disgusting fangs. Fangs, ignore my spelling errors, into my toe. So we can say here, I am afraid of something. Or we can make someone feel a spider crawling over their foot, crawling in between their toes and gnawing at their little toe. And then they feel the fear that we fear. So once again, this is just a difference between explaining a process, guiding someone through a process, or showing the result. And so when we look at practical writing, what we want to think, first of all, there's only 3 parts of every sentence. And throughout this course, you're going to see this over and over and over. All we have is a subject, a verb, and an object. The subject, essentially, in storytelling and anything, and even in psychology, there's only 2 aspects. It's the hero or the villain. That's it. That's the subject of our sentence. In the case of I, most subjects, it's I, he, or she. I, because I'm always talking to you, so I'm expressing my subjective opinion or my subjective experience. And he and she, because we fucking love gossip. We love to talk about someone or something. Now, we can talk about many things, but it's very complicated if you have 17 protagonists. Just look at any Marvel movie. Fucking terrible. You can't follow a single one of them because you have way too many protagonists in a story. I don't care about any of them. So when that big bald-headed guy clicks his fingers and they all die, I feel absolutely nothing because I didn't care for one of them, because you didn't stick with one of them for long enough for me to understand them and to care about their journey or their redemption. So, principally, generally, we love he or she. These are the most commonly used. So we have our subject. On the other side of the fence, we have our object. Our object can be anything. It can be an action, to run. It can be jazz or metal. Like it could be a thing. It could be a person, her, him, them, they, whatever the fuck their pronoun is. It can be a thing like English. Our object is just that palpable, tangible thing that we are interacting with. And our verb is just how we interact with it. It doesn't matter how complex your idea or how simple it is. There are only these 3 parts. And yes, sometimes verbs don't require objects. But in general, this is what we're doing. A protagonist is manipulating or interacting with some type of an object. Now, what we want to do is look at simplicity. Well, what's the difference between a sentence with verb to be and a sentence with verb to do? We see it here. It's practical, far more practical. I'm a father tells me nothing. It's easy. Anyone can say that. Like I said, the internet prides itself on just, hey, tell people what you are. But I don't do that. It doesn't matter. Nobody's talking about what they do. You just have to say you're courageous. You just have to say you're this, that, or the other. And everyone will click like because everyone is doing the same thing too, and nobody's calling each other out in their bullshit. So that is an easy thing to do, is to say what you are. To say what you do is far more complex. This is a thing like if someone says, well, I am a scientist. All right, so what do? Fucking everything. Depending on that person, the research that they're doing, or maybe if they're working in a lab or they're working in a classroom, whatever they're doing has hundreds of verbs attached to it, and it's far more complex. But we learn from that experience. That's the story we all want. We all want to know, what do you do? It's not a bad sentence. It's one of the greatest questions you can have, because we can discover people through two things. What do you do? And what do you do in your free time? What do you do is your profession. It's your mask. If we think that do itself is not a verb. Do is a seed. From do comes the possibility of every verb possible. So it is a seed. So we can say if do is a seed, then every verb is the flower. So for me, for example, I teach English and I write books. They are my principal professions. They are my principal flowers. They're the ones in my garden that stand strong, bold, proud, and everyone can see, and that I try to attend to the most. And then we say, well, what do you do in your free time? We just add this kind of time context. Well, this represents what? We could say your hobbies, but this represent as well this other aspect of you. This is, for some people it might be simple. They might just say, I watch Netflix, and their life is just, working and watching TV. That's it. Very simple. It's just two flowers in their garden, and sometimes both are really unattended to. In my case, I study a lot. I hang out with my kids because they're my best friends. That's all I really want to do. What else do I do? I practice yoga. I run with my dogs. I practice Muay Thai. I work out a lot, so lift weights. And what else do I do? I meditate quite a bit. I clean a lot because I absolutely love cleaning my house. And look, there's more. But essentially what these are, this is my garden. Each one of these is a single flower, and each one has to be attended to look after it and to make sure that you're doing it at the best you can do it. These two questions, we can understand who a person is. Who are they when they're at their best, when they're trying to filter every single word and be the most potent version of themselves in their profession? And who are they when they get to let all that down? Do they just relax and they go to bars and have barbecues and chill? Or do they decide to do more, continuously difficult tasks? Do they do millions of things and their garden just looks impossible to attend? Or do they just do a couple of things? But either way, through the verb of action, we understand more. All right, so let's finish today with just one activity. I want to look at, for example, in this sentence here, the intent of the teacher is to present an explanation of simplicity. Simplicity. All right, so we have this rule in English, if you don't know, which just means keep it simple, stupid. And what do we mean by that? Well, we mean that when the instinct for every person, okay, let me go back. When I was growing up in the 90s, it was cool to pretend you were an idiot. It was. Everyone was pretending they were stupid. In 2020, 2021, 22, we're in the age of information. Today, it's cool to pretend you're a nerd. Now, it's still not actually cool to be a nerd. When you tell people that you spend your weekends watching lectures and go to bed at 8:30 so you can wake up in the morning and run 10 kilometers and drink water and just do all nerdy shit or whatever, you're still a nerd and people look at you oddly. But it's cool to say things like, oh my God, I'm such a nerd. It's cool to maybe watch a TED Talk and then try to pretend you know something about quadrilateral. You saw something yesterday, you want to impress your friends and pretend to your friends that you're studious, and that you spend all your free time learning things. So you start trying to pull facts out of that TED Talk that you watch. Verb to be will let you do that. Verb to be will let you just name all of the big words that you learned in that talk. The thing about quadrilateral is you need to know about flobulation, trobulation, and tobulation. Your friend's like, holy fuck. They don't want to look stupid, so they're going to nod and agree with you. Before you know it, you have 16 people at a table just fooling each other with nonsense. And that is where we are today. It's some Instagrammer standing near naked in front of a mirror quoting something from Schopenhauer. It's nonsense. And it's the age of pretending you know something about something you learned 8 seconds before. And so from this, there's an instinct that when we're talking about an idea, we want to make it sound as complex as possible. We want to sound smart. So sounding smart means filling my sentence with as much as possible. So this might be, for example, using superlatives. Saying it's the biggest, it was the best, it was the worst. This might be, instead of looking at process and verb to do, using nouns. Well, this is an instance of knowledge at its worst. By using nouns, it makes you sound more educated. It makes you sound more articulate, but it doesn't in any way possible. So the difference between verb to do and verb to be in this case is if you know what you're talking about, you can explain the process. You can use verb to do. If you have no fucking idea what you're talking about, you'll use verb to be. You'll deal with blocks. Instead of dealing with moving parts, you'll deal with blocks. And blocks are nouns. Nouns don't do anything. So you can just say big words without knowing exactly what they do or without being able to explain to another person what they do. The other instinct is, like I said, like dressing up your sentences, putting as many words as possible in them to make them sound better. When we lack confidence, we dress ourselves in dingleberries. Like the superlative and things like that, they are makeup for language. So when you lack confidence, you can just kind of dangle gold and jewelry all over yourself, and it'll take attention away from the fragility of your eyes. The same thing with our sentences. When we don't feel we're saying anything, we'll put as many words in as possible. And then if it sounds complicated, well, we're saying something. Simplicity is a beautiful thing. It takes guts, it takes courage, because it exposes you. When your sentence is really simple, it exposes you and shows that either you're saying something or you're not. And if you're not, shut the fuck up. And if you are, keep it as simple as damn possible so that everyone can understand the premise and the idea. And then everyone can be invited into that idea. So let's come back to the sentence here. The intent of the teacher is to present an explanation of simplicity. That sounds a little pompous, a little assy. This is me trying to sound educated. All right, so let's come back to our idea here. And what we want to do, we want to work out, first of all, in our sentence, well, who is our subject? Who is if there's a person, can we make that our Harry Potter or whoever the fuck the kid like? Number 2 here, we want to think about, well, what is our object? What are we kicking around? What is the ball in the sentence? And finally, how do they interact with each other? It's easier just to work in this way. So in this sentence, the intent of the teacher is to present an explanation of simplicity. In this sentence here, this whole part becomes our subject, the intent of the teacher. Our verb is just verb to be is, and then all of this becomes our object, to present an explanation of simplicity. All right, so who is our subject? Yeah, the teacher. That's it. So the teacher. So now we want to think, well, what will be our object in this case? So in this case, we have we have an infinitive here. And just to explain, this is not a verb. A verb is only a verb when it's functional in a relationship between a subject and an object. For example, if I say, I like to run, there's only one verb in that sentence, and that is like. This is no longer a verb. The moment we want to use an action as an object, something tangible, something we can lift in our hands, we need to turn water into ice. And to do that, we need the infinitive or a gerund. So I like to run or I like running. Now it's no longer a verb. Now it's something solid. Now it's something that can either start a sentence or we can kick it around. So in this case, to present is one of our objects. We also have an explanation, and then we have simplicity. That's a loaded sentence, as we'd say. So we might say, well, this is unnecessary to present something because we know it's a teacher, it's what they're doing. This aspect might be what we'd say is redundant. It doesn't improve the sentence at all. So then we might say, well, this here, an explanation of simplicity. But we don't want, if we can remove the noun form here, it would be better for us. So we can say, to explain simplicity. Oh, shit. All right, so in this case, we now have our object and we now have our subject. We're 2/3 of the way through our sentence. So now all we need is our verb. So we're left with this dilemma, this problem. Here we have verb to be, and verb to be allows you to do nouns. It's dependent upon nouns and adjectives. So we have this idea of the intent. All right, so in this sentence, it sounds very smart. The intent of the teacher is to present an explanation of simplicity. All right, so in reality, the teacher intends to explain simplicity. You could do it in the current form and say, fuck the intent part, and say the teacher is explaining simplicity. Keep it as simple as damn possible. Now we understand things. When we remove all of that unnecessary gobbledygook, our sentence becomes more simplistic. Our sentence becomes more impactful. And so this brings us all the way back to, what is that difference between do and be? Well, leave it up to the person who's listening. Invite them into your conversation. Man, I've been working all morning. I've been doing this. I've been doing that. I've been doing that. And now the other person gets to say, wow, you must be exhausted. You must be so tired. So I did this last year, and I did this, and I did this, and I did this, and I did this. Wow, you must be so happy. You must be so pleased. This as well is the art of communication. It's inviting people in. It's giving them space where they can be a part of your story, guiding them into your story. And so that's where we'll leave this lesson for today. And we'll come back, we'll do more activities. And you're going to see me as well talking about why I don't like verb to be a lot throughout this process. So that's it. As always, listen, I've heard, and I'm sure that there have been issues where someone has said that the camera is appearing upside down. Listen, if you're seeing the camera upside down in the moment, it might be some of your settings. So to fix that, I don't know anything about computers or the intra-network thing that people talk about, but I've heard that to fix that upside down camera, if you click like, share, and subscribe, apparently it goes about fixing it. So listen, if you got any questions, any doubts about English, about grammar, structure, vocabulary, meanings, anything whatsoever, give me an email on the list below, on the thing below that direction, and I can build and prepare a class out of your doubts. So listen, guys, thank you very much. You're going to hear me say this every single video, and I say to every one of my students, every single class, and I mean it from the bottom of my heart. Love the people who love you. Everyone else is just a piece of shit. I'll see you in the next video.